The London rain felt different on my skin as a civilian. It was 2010, and after 10 years in the British Army, I stood outside the administrative building with my discharge papers. My military career, which had taken me from the deserts of Iraq to the cave systems of Afghanistan, was officially over. 3 months passed in a blur of half-hearted job applications and too many pints at the local pub. My flat in East London was where I could decompress from a decade of service, but also where I found myself staring at the ceiling most nights, restless and purposeless. I was returning from a morning run when I noticed them, 2 men in dark suits standing beside a black sedan, looking decidedly American and completely out of place on my residential street. "James Harrison?" The taller one stepped forward as I slowed to a walk. "Depends who's asking." I kept my distance, eyeing both men carefully. "We represent a joint task force that could use someone with your particular skill set." He offered me a business card with nothing but a name and number embossed on heavy stock paper. My skill set? I took the card, my curiosity piqued despite my wariness. "Your extensive experience with underground operations in Afghanistan, the cave systems specifically." The shorter man spoke for the first time. "We'd like to discuss an opportunity. Security clearance level 5. Joint operation between several governments." They knew specifics about my service record that weren't public knowledge. That meant high-level access and serious interest. After 3 months of boring civilian life, I felt a spark of interest, the pull of purpose. What followed was a week of rigorous background checks and psychological evaluations, more intense than anything I'd experienced during my military service. They probed every aspect of my mental fitness, asking bizarre hypothetical questions about isolation, unexpected discoveries, and how I handled major changes in understanding. I learned nothing about the actual mission. 2 weeks after our first meeting, I boarded a military transport plane bound for Nevada, carrying only a small duffel of personal items. Everything else I needed would supposedly be provided at the destination. The facility stood in the desert, a sprawling complex of low-lying buildings surrounded by multiple security perimeters. No signage, no identifiable markings, just concrete, steel, and men with guns who checked my credentials with stern efficiency. "Welcome to nowhere, Harrison." The security officer cracked the barest hint of a smile as he handed back my temporary ID. "Colonel Grayson is waiting for you in briefing room A. Jenkins will escort you." Jenkins led me through many corridors into the center of the facility. The briefing room looked like dozens I'd seen before. Utilitarian design, large table, projection screens. The man standing at the head of the table, however, commanded attention in a way few officers I'd encountered could manage. "Harrison, good to have you on board." Colonel Grayson didn't offer his hand or smile. He watched me with cold efficiency. His salt and pepper hair was cropped in a perfect military cut, and his uniform bore no wrinkles or imperfections. "Thank you, sir, though I'm still unclear what exactly I'm on board for." "Take a seat. The others will be joining us momentarily." I sat and watched as 14 other people filtered into the room over the next 10 minutes. They represented a range of ages and physical types, though all carried themselves with the alertness of people with military or intelligence backgrounds. I counted 5 women among them. Based on accents and subtle behavioral cues, I identified Americans, Canadians, Australians, and 3 other Brits besides myself. Grayson began without preamble once everyone was seated. "Each of you has been selected for this task force based on your unique qualifications and, more importantly, your psychological profiles." He activated a screen showing a satellite image of Antarctica. 3 months ago, our thermal imaging satellites detected an unusual heat signature beneath the ice sheet here. He pointed to a location that meant nothing to me without coordinates. Past expeditions to investigate similar anomalies have disappeared without trace. Grayson's voice remained clinically detached. "We believe we know why." A heavy silence filled the room. I studied the faces of my new colleagues, noting the mix of skepticism and intrigue. "You've all been chosen because you can handle extreme isolation and—" Grayson paused, searching for the right word. "Extraordinary discoveries." Over the next hour, Grayson outlined our training regimen for the coming months. Specialized equipment, extreme weather conditioning, geological training, and communication protocols for various scenarios. What struck me most was what he didn't say, the specifics of what we might find beneath the ice. After the briefing, we were shown to our quarters, Spartan rooms with twin beds. I was paired with a broad-shouldered American who introduced himself simply as Davis, former SEAL. "So, what's your read on all this?" Davis asked once we'd settled in, his voice low despite the fact that we were alone. I considered my answer carefully. Too much compartmentalization. Nobody has the full picture except Grayson. Davis nodded. "Geothermal anomaly, my ass. You don't assemble a team like this for a scientific expedition." Over the next few days, I observed the rigid information structure of the operation. Different team members received different briefings. Equipment specialists knew nothing about the geological training. Communications experts weren't briefed on the specialized vehicles we would apparently be using. It was textbook need to know, but taken to an extreme that made me increasingly uneasy. It was during my third night at the facility that I overheard Grayson. I'd left my room for the bathroom and passed by a partially open door to one of the secure communication rooms. Grayson's voice drifted out clearly. "Yes, sir. The team is assembled. All preparations on schedule for making contact in January." A pause. "We've updated the diplomatic protocols as requested. If they're as advanced as the intelligence suggests, we'll need to establish clear boundaries from the beginning." I moved past quickly before I was discovered, my mind racing. Making contact, diplomatic protocols. I suddenly understood. We weren't searching for something in Antarctica. We were meeting someone. The next morning, I caught Grayson alone in the corridor outside the mess hall. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" He looked at me with those steel gray eyes. "Go ahead, Harrison. We're not investigating a thermal anomaly. We're preparing for contact with whoever lives under the ice." I kept my voice steady, watching his reaction. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by calculation. He glanced up and down the empty corridor. "Walk with me, Harrison." We headed toward the training area, his pace measured and unhurried. "What made you reach that conclusion?" he asked. "Your conversation last night. Making contact. Diplomatic protocols. That's not the language of scientific exploration." Grayson nodded slightly. "Most of your teammates haven't put it together yet. Your file mentioned your analytical skills, but I'm still impressed. What are we really preparing for, sir?" He stopped walking and turned to face me. Evidence of an advanced civilization living beneath Antarctica was discovered in 1938 by German explorers. The Americans confirmed it during reconnaissance missions in the 1950s. We've maintained observation ever since, but never established direct contact. My mind reeled at the implications. Until now, what changed? They did. Grayson's expression remained impassive. 6 months ago, we began receiving radio transmissions on specific military frequencies. They initiated contact. And our mission? First official diplomatic contact. The training will prepare you for meeting potentially hostile entities in extreme conditions. Grayson's voice hardened. This information is not to be shared with the other team members. They'll be briefed when necessary. I nodded, though questions multiplied in my mind. Who were these underground dwellers? How had they remained hidden for so long? And why contact us now? "One more thing, Harrison." Grayson looked at me intently. "You were selected partly because your psychological profile suggests you can handle major changes in how you see reality. Not everyone can. Remember that, when you meet them." As he walked away, I stood in the corridor, trying to grasp what awaited us beneath the Antarctic ice. Everything I thought I knew about human history and our place on this planet was about to change. That night, sleep evaded me as questions multiplied in my mind. Who were these underground dwellers? How had they remained hidden? What did they want from us? The real training began the next morning. Gone were the general briefings, replaced by a regimen so specialized it could only have one purpose: preparing us for something extraordinary. Our days started at 500 hours with physical conditioning tailored for extreme environments. The standard military fitness approach quickly gave way to specialized exercises developed for astronauts and deep-sea explorers, training designed for bodies under unusual pressure and stress. "Your muscles will need to function efficiently with less oxygen," explained Dr. Sharma during our first specialized training session. "The atmospheric composition will differ significantly from what your bodies are accustomed to." We spent weeks learning to use experimental breathing apparatus that recycled air while adding precise oxygen mixtures. The equipment was lightweight but complex, with digital displays monitoring blood oxygen levels and environmental toxins. "This isn't standard military gear," Davis muttered to me during our third training session. "This is next-generation tech, not even available to special forces yet." I nodded, noting how the equipment seemed designed specifically for our mission rather than adapted from existing technology. Someone had been developing this for years. By the second month, we moved to communication training. The devices looked deceptively simple: earpieces with attached microphones and wristband controls, but performed like nothing I'd seen before. "These transmitters operate on frequencies that can penetrate dense rock and ice," the communications specialist explained. "Signal degradation is minimal even through 2 kilometers of solid material." During a practice exercise in a nearby cave system, I tested the range limitations by venturing deeper than instructed. The signal remained crystal clear despite the mass of rock between me and the surface team. This technology wasn't just advanced, it was revolutionary. Dr. Sharma's scientific briefings grew increasingly specific. She taught us about atmospheric composition in isolated subterranean environments, geothermal energy systems, and the biological adaptations needed for underground survival. "Pay careful attention to these mineral formations," she said during a geology lecture, displaying images of unusual crystalline structures. "They indicate the presence of geothermal activity that could support substantial energy requirements." Energy requirements for what? I wondered. The implications were clear. We weren't preparing to find primitive cave dwellers. In the third month, we began training with prototype vehicles, sleek, cylindrical craft designed for narrow tunnels. The controls were intuitive, responding to the slightest touch. During one simulation, I navigated a virtual tunnel system that twisted and narrowed unpredictably. "Excellent work, Harrison," Grayson noted afterward, reviewing my performance metrics. "You adapt quickly to unfamiliar technology." "Thank you, sir. Though I'm curious about the design parameters. These vehicles seem built for specific tunnel dimensions. Do we have advanced knowledge of the exact environment?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "The designs are based on preliminary data from ground-penetrating radar. Focus on mastering the equipment, not questioning its origins." The psychological conditioning intensified in month 4. We spent hours in sensory deprivation tanks, training our minds to endure isolation and disorientation. The sessions grew longer each week, pushing the boundaries of mental endurance. After one particularly grueling 9-hour session, I emerged to find 2 team members being escorted from the facility. "What happened?" I asked Davis as we watched them leave. "Failed their psych evaluations," he replied quietly. "They showed some of us fabricated images yesterday. Humanoid figures, but different. Those 2 didn't handle it well." "Different how?" Davis hesitated. "Larger eyes, elongated limbs, adaptations you'd expect from generations underground. Command wanted to see our reactions before we encounter the real thing." That night, I lay awake, connecting the pieces. The breathing apparatus designed for different atmospheric conditions, communications equipment that worked through rock, vehicles built for specific tunnel systems. We weren't being prepared for discovery. We were being prepared for encounter. During the 5th month, I noticed Grayson spent increasing time in private communications with Washington. 3 times I passed the secure communications room to find guards posted outside while he spoke with someone he referred to only as director. My performance evaluations consistently ranked among the highest in the team. I excelled at adaptation exercises, scenario simulations, and the increasingly complex technical training. This earned me a certain latitude with Grayson, which I carefully leveraged during a tactical planning session. "Sir, our training suggests we're preparing for contact with a technologically advanced society, not primitive conditions. The satellite data must show more than just heat signatures." The room fell silent. Several team members moved uncomfortably, eyes darting between Grayson and me. After a measured pause, Grayson nodded. "Perceptive, Harrison. Yes, ground-penetrating radar and quantum imaging have detected electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced energy systems. We believe whatever, or whoever, lives beneath the ice possesses technology that may rival or exceed our own." His admission surprised everyone. For many team members, this was the first confirmation of what our training had implied. In December 2011, 6 months after our arrival at the facility, we received our final briefings. The team gathered in the main conference room, now reduced to 15 members after the psychological washouts. Grayson stood before a high-resolution display showing detailed Antarctic topography. "What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels," he began. 3 months ago, we established radio contact with representatives claiming to be from an advanced human civilization beneath Antarctica. They speak multiple Earth languages and have expressed interest in formal diplomatic relations. Despite my earlier suspicions, hearing it stated so plainly sent a chill down my spine. Several team members gasped or muttered under their breath. "Your mission is to establish diplomatic contact, assess their technological capabilities, and evaluate potential threats to surface nations. You've been selected and trained for this specific purpose, to handle first contact with a human civilization that has evolved separately from our own for thousands of years." Dr. Sharma stepped forward. "Their initial communications suggest they branched from surface humanity approximately 15,000 years ago, during the last major ice age. If accurate, their evolutionary path and technological development have occurred in isolation from ours." Grayson continued, "You depart in 3 days. Before then, each of you will receive medical implants, tracking devices, and neural monitors that will record your experiences and vital signs throughout the mission." The medical procedures took place that afternoon. I watched the surgeon insert a small device at the base of my skull, supposedly to monitor neural activity and stress responses. A second implant went into my left forearm, described as a location tracker with emergency communication capabilities. That evening, I returned to my quarters to find subtle signs of disturbance. Items moved slightly from their positions, my personal notebook at a different angle than I'd left it. Someone had searched my room. Whether they found anything of concern, I couldn't tell. As I contemplated this development, Davis knocked on my door. "Got a minute?" he asked, his expression guarded. I let him in and closed the door. "I saw you questioning Grayson today," he said, keeping his voice low. "You're right about a lot of things, but you need to watch yourself. This isn't my first operation involving them. You've encountered this civilization before?" His eyes flicked to the corners of the room, checking for surveillance devices. "Let's just say certain agencies have known about our friends under the ice for longer than they're admitting. Previous candidates who asked too many questions disappeared from the program. Official record says they failed psychological evaluations. Like our 2 colleagues last month?" Davis shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Just keep your head down and do the job. Whatever you discover down there, some things are better left unsaid until we know who's really running this operation." He left shortly after. One thing was increasingly clear. Our mission had layers of purpose unknown to most of the team. As I packed my gear for Antarctica, I carefully considered my position. Whatever waited beneath the ice, whatever Grayson's true orders might be, I was committed now. The tracking device in my arm and the neural monitor at the base of my skull ensured that even my thoughts were potentially under surveillance. In 3 days, we would journey to the most isolated continent on Earth to meet beings who had been watching us from below for millennia. I was prepared for the unknown environment and potential technological marvels we might encounter. The January air cut through my thermal gear as our military transport plane landed at McMurdo Station. Antarctica in summer still meant temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. 6 months of training had prepared us for many things, but the raw reality of this isolation hit differently than simulations. We spent 3 days acclimatizing while maintaining our cover as a specialized climate research team. The regular station personnel gave us curious looks. We clearly weren't scientists despite the patches on our jackets. "Remember your cover stories," Grayson reminded us during our final briefing. Minimal interaction with station staff. On the 4th morning, we boarded unmarked helicopters before dawn. Davis sat beside me. "Point 0, he said quietly over the helicopter noise. "You'll know it when you see it." After 3 hours flying over endless white terrain, we landed at coordinates 80 degrees, 65 degrees. As we approached on foot, a cluster of red tents came into view, arranged in a perfect circle around a central structure. The setup mimicked a typical research station, except for the armed guards positioned at regular intervals around the perimeter. "Climate researchers don't usually carry military-grade weapons," I said to Davis. He nodded. "Or have motion sensors and ground-penetrating radar." Guards checked our credentials twice before allowing us into the central tent. Inside, the research station facade disappeared completely. The tent housed an elevator shaft. Dr. Sharma examined the shaft lining. "Fascinating composite. It's maintaining consistent temperature despite the surrounding ice." Grayson gathered us around a digital display showing what lay beneath us. "This shaft descends 500 meters through the ice cap. From there, we'll transfer to specialized vehicles for the horizontal journey." The elevator itself was silent as we descended, no mechanical sounds or vibrations. Whatever technology powered it wasn't standard military equipment. We dropped 500 meters in less than a minute, emerging into an underground hangar carved from the ice. 6 vehicles waited, resembling a cross between military transports and snowmobiles, with treads designed specifically for ice traversal. "Mount up," Grayson ordered. 60 kilometers to the antechamber." The journey through ice tunnels was surreal. Our headlights illuminated walls of compressed blue ice that had formed over thousands of years. The tunnels themselves were too perfect, uniform width and height with smooth floors that accommodated our vehicles easily. "Were these tunnels already here when we found this place?" I asked over the comms. "Focus on your driving, Harrison," came Grayson's immediate reply. Davis's voice came through on a private channel moments later. "No, they weren't." The implication sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. After 2 hours of driving, the tunnel opened into a vast space that stole my breath. Grayson had called it the antechamber. The ceiling arched at least 30 meters overhead. What caught everyone's attention were the walls. They were covered in symbols, thousands of characters carved into the ice with precision. They resembled a hybrid of Sanskrit and Egyptian hieroglyphics, flowing in organized patterns across the surfaces. Dr. Sharma immediately began documenting everything with specialized equipment. "These are extraordinary," she said. "The patterns suggest a mathematical basis to the language, and the preservation in the ice, these could be thousands of years old." The security team fanned out, establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency. They placed sensors at regular intervals around the chamber, all feeding data back to a central console monitored by Grayson's second-in-command. "All readings normal, sir," he reported. "Thermal imaging shows no movement beyond the southern wall." I turned my attention to the southern wall. Unlike the other surfaces covered in symbols, this wall was perfectly smooth. "That's our entry point," Grayson announced, directing equipment to be positioned facing it. "Prepare for final descent protocol." We'd trained for this moment for months, but standing in an ancient ice chamber beneath Antarctica, preparing to make contact with an unknown civilization, felt entirely different from any simulation. I checked my specialized breathing apparatus and communication equipment, noting that several team members were doing the same, with expressions ranging from focused concentration to poorly concealed anxiety. Then it happened without warning. A section of the smooth southern wall simply slid aside. The opening appeared without sound. 3 figures emerged from the opening. They looked human, but with differences that immediately registered as other. They stood taller than average, at least 6.5 feet, with slender builds. Their skin was pale with a subtle luminescence that seemed to capture and reflect the smallest amount of available light. Their eyes were larger than human norm, set in faces of striking symmetry. All 3 wore silver jumpsuits that fit perfectly to their bodies, made of material unlike any fabric I'd seen. It looked metallic, but seemed soft. The central figure spoke, delivering the third and greatest shock. "Welcome to the outer threshold," he said in perfect, unaccented English. "We've been expecting your arrival." The chamber fell silent. Our team froze in various positions, some reaching for weapons, others simply staring in disbelief. Grayson recovered first, stepping forward with practiced confidence. "I am Colonel Grayson, leading this expedition on behalf of a coalition of surface nations." The central figure inclined his head slightly. "I am Counselor Theron, diplomatic representative of the Luminan Council." His eyes swept over our group with calm assessment. "We've monitored your approach since you established your base camp above. Before that, we observed your surface communications to learn your languages and customs." Dr. Sharma stepped forward. "You monitor our communications? For how long?" Theron smiled. "We maintain observation outposts near the surface. Radio waves pass easily through ice. We've studied all major surface languages for over a century. I analyzed every aspect of Theron and his companions. Their movements were fluid and precise, suggesting both physical efficiency and cultural grace. Their voices carried perfectly in the ice chamber without seeming to project. How is survival possible in these conditions? I asked before thinking about protocol. Theron turned his attention to me. Your name? James Harrison. To answer your question, James Harrison, what you see here is merely the threshold. This is not where we live. He gestured toward the opening behind him. We would like to invite you to witness Lumina, our home. There, your questions about our survival and history can be properly addressed. Grayson stepped forward. Before we proceed, we need to establish security protocols for our team. Of course, Theron replied smoothly. Your weapons and communications equipment will function within our territories, though certain energy signatures may experience interference. We have no intention of isolating or disarming your team. This concession seemed to surprise Grayson, who had clearly expected resistance on the weapons issue. As the technical and security staff began preparations for entering the opening, Grayson moved to my side and gripped my arm just above the elbow. A word, Harrison. He pulled me several meters away from the main group, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I saw the look on your face. You're already fascinated by them. His grip tightened. Remember, your first loyalty is to this mission, to the surface. Regardless of what we discover beyond that door, regardless of how impressive or benevolent they might appear, we have our orders. Which are what, exactly? I challenged quietly. Because diplomatic contact seems to be going well so far. Grayson's eyes hardened. Our primary mission is to assess and secure information, technology, strategic advantage. These are our objectives, not friendship. He released my arm and returned to the main group, leaving me with a cold feeling that had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. I watched as Theron consulted briefly with his companions, their conversation inaudible despite the chamber's acoustics. Whatever communication passed between them seemed to reach quick resolution. Theron turned back to us. We are prepared to escort you now. The journey to Lumina will take approximately 1 hour through our transit system. As our team gathered equipment and prepared to enter the doorway, I found myself watching both sides with equal wariness. The Luminans with their perfect composure and ancient presence on one side, Grayson with his hidden agenda and talk of securing on the other. Davis appeared at my shoulder. "Quite the reception committee," he murmured. "Ready to see what's behind door number 1? "Not sure anyone's ready for that," I replied. "But I'm more concerned about what we're bringing with us." He nodded slightly. "Watch your back, and not just around them." With that warning, he moved forward with the advance team, leaving me to follow with the unsettling awareness that I was caught between two worlds, neither of which I could fully trust. Theron stood by the opening, waiting with patience that suggested he could remain there indefinitely if necessary. When I approached, he tilted his head slightly, looking at me. "You have questions, James Harrison," he said. It wasn't a question. "About 1 million, I admitted. His smile returned. "Then let us proceed to where answers await." Through the doorway, I stepped into a tunnel that seemed to defy all natural laws. Instead of rough ice formations, the walls were perfectly smooth, with an odd luminescence that provided enough light to see without being harsh on the eyes. "This material," Dr. Sharma said, running her fingers along the wall as we walked deeper into the passage. "It's not ice anymore. Some kind of composite? A silicate-based material of our design," Theron explained. "It maintains consistent temperature and provides illumination without external power sources." The tunnel widened into a large chamber where several vehicles waited. They resembled elongated pods with no visible wheels or propulsion systems that hovered a few inches above the ground. "These will transport us to Lumina," Theron said. "The journey takes approximately 1 hour through our transit network." "Electromagnetic propulsion?" Dr. Sharma asked, examining the vehicles with obvious fascination. Theron's lips curved in that unnervingly perfect smile. A simplified explanation, but essentially correct. We boarded the vehicles, 6 team members to each pod with 1 Luminan guide. I found myself sharing with Davis, Dr. Sharma, and 3 security personnel. Grayson traveled in the lead vehicle with Theron. No handles or seatbelts were visible, yet when the pod accelerated, some invisible force kept us comfortably in place without restraint. "Inertial dampening," Dr. Sharma whispered, her eyes wide. Theoretical physics made real. Our journey through the tunnel network was like nothing I'd experienced. We moved at extraordinary speeds, yet felt almost no sensation of movement. The tunnels occasionally branched or merged with others, forming an intricate network that suggested centuries of engineering. Glowing symbols appeared at intervals along the walls. Navigational markers, perhaps, or something else entirely. "How far down are we?" I asked our guide, Linar. "Currently, we are traveling at approximately 2.7 kilometers beneath the ice sheet," she replied. "The depth will increase as we approach Lumina proper." Davis sat beside me, his expression controlled but his eyes taking in everything. I noticed his hand occasionally brushing the sidearm holstered beneath his jacket. "Remarkable engineering," he commented softly. "Perfect tolerances on these tunnels." Hours passed as we traveled deeper into the earth. The network of tunnels became increasingly complex, with more branches and intersections. Occasionally, we passed smaller outposts, stations with luminans working at control panels or monitoring equipment. "Checkpoints," Davis murmured. "They're tracking everything that moves through these tunnels." Finally, our vehicle slowed as we approached what appeared to be a massive wall of the same luminescent material that lined the tunnels. A seam appeared in its center, widening to create an opening large enough for our vehicles to pass through. What lay beyond stole my breath. We emerged onto a platform overlooking a vast underground world. Lumina stretched before us, an enormous cavern that extended farther than seemed possible. The ceiling arched kilometers above us, studded with what looked like crystals that refracted light throughout the space. But most stunning was the artificial sun suspended at the very top, a perfect sphere of golden white light that illuminated everything below with an approximation of natural daylight. "My God," Dr. Sharma whispered beside me. The city itself defied description. Structures of varying shapes and sizes extended upward from the cavern floor, some reaching nearly to the ceiling. They weren't buildings in the conventional sense, more like sculpted formations that blended organically with their surroundings. Connecting them were a network of bridges, platforms, and what appeared to be the same electromagnetic transit system we had used to arrive. "Welcome to Lumina," Theron said as he approached from the lead vehicle, one of 7 primary habitation centers of our civilization. 7? I asked, still struggling to process the scale of what I was seeing. "Yes, connected by the transit network you experienced. Our total population remains stable at approximately 2 million inhabitants across all centers. 2 million people living beneath the Earth's surface, completely unknown to the world above." The implications were staggering. Grayson stood beside Theron, his military composure temporarily shaken by the sight before us. "How long has this been here?" "Lumina was established approximately 15,000 years ago, during what your scholars call the last glacial maximum," Theron replied. "When surface conditions became increasingly hostile, a portion of humanity chose to seek shelter beneath the earth rather than migrate across the surface. That contradicts our understanding of human technological development," Dr. Sharma interjected. "The capabilities needed to create this," she gestured at the vast cavern, "weren't possible for humans 15,000 years ago." Theron nodded. "You are correct. We were aided by the architects." "The architects?" I asked. "Those who came before," he said, his tone shifting subtly. "Their origins and ultimate fate remain subjects of scholarly debate even among our historians. What matters is that they provided the foundation for our civilization: knowledge of geothermal energy, artificial illumination, and sustainable underground habitation." I noted how quickly he'd pivoted away from details about these mysterious benefactors. Before I could press further, we were ushered toward another transport platform. "You will be provided accommodations in our diplomatic quarter," Theron explained as we boarded. "From there, you may rest and prepare for more comprehensive exchanges tomorrow." The diplomatic quarter turned out to be a collection of structures near the eastern edge of the cavern. The interiors were surprisingly familiar, furnished with beds, chairs, and tables that resembled surface furniture, though made from materials I didn't recognize. "We've prepared these spaces based on our understanding of your comfort requirements," Theron explained. "If adjustments are needed, please inform the attendants." The attendants were younger Luminans who maintained the same studied politeness I noticed in all our interactions. Their movements seemed precisely calculated, neither too casual nor too distant. Perfect diplomatic hosts. Yet something about their careful behavior suggested we were being evaluated with every interaction. "A remarkable achievement," Grayson commented as he surveyed the accommodations. "Your civilization has flourished in isolation." "Not complete isolation," Theron corrected. "We maintain observation posts near the surface. Your radio communications have been particularly informative over the past century." That explained their perfect English and knowledge of current events. I wondered what else they had learned while we remained oblivious to their existence. "May I ask why you chose now to initiate contact?" Dr. Sharma inquired. Theron's expression grew more serious. "Necessity. Our sensors have detected increasing drilling activities from surface nations. Several operations have approached dangerously close to our outer tunnel systems." "Oil exploration," Grayson suggested. "Among other activities," Theron replied with a pointed look. "Rather than risk accidental discovery that might prove destabilizing for both societies, we determined that controlled diplomatic relations would be preferable. After providing us with communication devices to request assistance if needed, Theron and the other Luminans departed, leaving our team to settle into the diplomatic quarter. "Everyone gather in the central room in 1 hour," Grayson ordered. "Full debrief after we've had time to process what we've seen." As the team dispersed, I took the opportunity to explore my assigned quarters. The space was minimalist but comfortable, with smooth walls of that same luminescent material providing soft light. No visible cameras or monitoring devices, but something told me observation didn't require visible technology here. I ran my fingers along the wall, wondering what sensors might lie beneath. The entire setup felt too perfect, accommodations built to make us comfortable while keeping us contained in a specific area. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Davis stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, stepping aside to let him enter. He closed the door and performed a quick visual sweep of the room before speaking. "I've seen this technology before," he said quietly. 3 years ago, classified mission in Antarctica, different sector from our entry point." I was shocked. "You've been here before?" "Not here specifically. A smaller outpost. My team discovered it accidentally during what was supposed to be a routine security patrol of a research station." He lowered his voice further. "We were sworn to secrecy. Records classified at the highest level. Does Grayson know about this?" "He was my commanding officer on that mission." I thought about this. "So, all this," I gestured around us. "The months of training, the elaborate first contact scenario, it's all theater?" "For most of the team, this is first contact. Only a handful of people topside know the truth." "And what is the truth exactly?" Before Davis could answer, a chime sounded, signaling the approaching debrief. He shook his head. "Later, just keep your eyes open." The central room had been arranged for our meeting, with chairs positioned in a circle. Grayson stood at the center as we assembled. "What we've witnessed today represents the most significant discovery in human history," he began. "A parallel human civilization that has developed independently for thousands of years." His words rang hollow now that I knew this wasn't the revelation he was pretending it to be. "Sir," I interrupted, a decision made in the moment that I might later regret. "Is this truly the first contact between our governments and the Luminans?" The room fell silent. Grayson's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at me. "Clarify your question, Harrison." "Davis mentioned a previous encounter with similar technology during a classified operation. I'm wondering if select governments already knew about Lumina before this mission." Grayson's expression hardened, but he maintained his composure. "Some surface nations have had limited encounters with outlying Luminan installations," he admitted. "However, this is the first official diplomatic mission to their central civilization. So we're not so much discovering them as they are officially revealing themselves," Dr. Sharma concluded. "Precisely," Grayson replied. "And now we need to focus on the opportunity this presents. Dr. Sharma, I want comprehensive documentation of their technological systems. Security team, maintain standard protocols and mapping of all accessible areas." As he continued assigning tasks, I sat back, watching the reactions around the room. Most team members seemed to accept Grayson's explanation, though I noticed Davis looking at me carefully. When the meeting concluded, I lingered as others filed out. The vast underground city housed technologies beyond our current capabilities, a population that had developed in parallel to surface humanity, and mysteries about these architects that even the Luminans seemed reluctant to fully explain. But perhaps most troubling was the realization forming in my mind. Our mission had been presented as a diplomatic first contact, but Grayson's instructions focused overwhelmingly on information gathering, technology assessment, and strategic mapping. This wasn't about establishing relations. It was about something else entirely, something Grayson and whoever he reported to considered far more valuable than diplomacy. As I returned to my quarters, the artificial sun above the city dimmed gradually, simulating sunset. In the fading light, Lumina took on a different quality. buildings illuminated from within, pathways marked by soft, glowing trails. Beautiful, sophisticated, and completely hidden from the world I knew. Whatever the true purpose of our mission, one thing was certain. We weren't here to make friends. We were here to take something back: information, technology, advantage, regardless of the diplomatic niceties. And I found myself caught between worlds, unsure where my loyalties should truly lie. 2 weeks in Lumina passed quickly. Each morning I woke to the artificial sun gradually brightening the ceiling of my quarters, mimicking dawn despite being kilometers below the Antarctic ice. The technology surrounding us made everything I'd seen in military service look primitive by comparison. Our first week followed a structured program of guided tours and presentations. The Luminans seemed determined to showcase their achievements, while carefully controlling our access. Theron served as our primary liaison. "Today, we will visit our Medical Sciences Division," Theron announced on our third day. "We believe this area may be of particular interest to your civilization." The medical facility occupied an entire section of the city, a complex of interconnected structures attached to the cavern walls. Dr. Sharma could barely contain her excitement as a Luminan physician demonstrated their diagnostic technology, a handheld device that scanned body systems without physical contact. "This identifies cellular abnormalities at their earliest stages," the physician explained. "Most conditions your surface medicine considers incurable are simply addressed before they manifest symptoms. Cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune disorders?" Dr. Sharma asked. "All effectively eliminated from our population centuries ago," came the calm reply. I watched Grayson's face during these demonstrations. While the rest of us showed amazement, his expression remained calculated, his eyes constantly checking everything. He was taking inventory of assets. The energy systems proved equally remarkable. On our 5th day, we visited a geothermal tap that extended deep into the Earth's crust. "This single facility powers all of Lumina," our guide explained beside a pulsing column of blue-white light. "The energy is drawn directly from the planetary core, converted through processes your physics has theorized but not yet implemented." "Zero emissions," Davis murmured beside me. "Limitless power." "How many of these facilities exist?" Grayson asked suddenly. Our guide hesitated before answering. "There are 17 major geothermal taps across our network. Each serves multiple habitation centers." I noted how Grayson nodded slightly, storing this information. Not the technological wonder, the strategic distribution. By the end of the first week, we'd established a routine. Mornings spent touring Luminan achievements, afternoons documenting our observations, evenings in the diplomatic quarter comparing notes. But something changed after our visit to the transportation hub. The transportation network connected all 7 Luminan habitation centers through the same electromagnetic tunnels we'd experienced on arrival. The central hub contained a 3-dimensional holographic map showing the entire system, thousands of kilometers of tunnels spanning beneath continents and ocean floors alike. The primary network was established by the architects, Theron explained as we stared at the glowing pathways. "We've expanded and maintained it over millennia. These extend beneath every continent," Grayson observed, studying the map with particular intensity. "Yes, though many peripheral tunnels were sealed after the Great Division." "Great Division?" I asked. Theron's expression became guarded. "A period of conflict approximately 8,000 years ago. Some factions wished to maintain regular contact with the surface world. Others advocated complete separation for security. The separatists prevailed. That evening, I noticed Grayson did not join us for the usual debriefing. When I passed his quarters later, I heard his voice behind the closed door, speaking in low, urgent tones. This became a pattern over the following days, Grayson increasingly absent, engaged in private meetings with senior Luminan officials. On our 8th day, we toured the agricultural sector. Vast chambers housed hydroponic systems bathed in precisely calibrated light. Plants grew in spiral patterns, maximizing space in 3 dimensions rather than the flat fields of surface farming. We produce all nutritional requirements for our population within these chambers. Our guide, a younger Luminan named Alara, explained. The system is entirely self-sustaining. While the rest of the team moved ahead, examining the vertical growing structures, I hung back with Alara. I'm curious about something, I said quietly. In all your observations of the surface world, have you ever intervened? Alara glanced around before answering. This is not information typically shared with surface visitors. I understand, but it would help me contextualize your civilization's relationship with ours. She hesitated, then spoke softly. There have been occasions when limited intervention was deemed necessary. Your Cuban Missile Crisis, for instance. Certain communication failures that might have escalated to nuclear exchange were redirected. The revelation sent a chill down my spine. You prevented nuclear war. The Council determined that radioactive contamination on such a scale would eventually threaten our habitats. Similar calculations have motivated other interventions throughout your history. Before I could ask more, she moved forward to rejoin the group, leaving me with troubling questions about how much of surface history had been subtly shaped by unseen hands. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grayson's secretive behavior, the knowledge that luminans had influenced surface events, and the implications of their advanced technology. Something wasn't adding up about our mission parameters. My opportunity came unexpectedly on the 10th day. Our group had returned from touring a cultural archive when Grayson announced he needed to refresh before the evening meal. I noticed he'd left his communications device on a side table in the common area, an uncharacteristic oversight for someone so disciplined. I waited until the room cleared, then quickly accessed the device. My military background included signals intelligence. I knew how to navigate secure communications without leaving traces. What I found confirmed my suspicions. A message thread with someone identified only as Director contained explicit instructions. Priority objectives remain defense systems and propulsion technology. Geological mapping of all access points is essential. Prepare preliminary assessment of acquisition challenges. Acquisition, not understanding or diplomatic exchange, acquisition. I memorized key details before returning the device exactly as I'd found it. When Davis entered the common area a few minutes later, I motioned him to follow me to a spot near a flowing water feature where conversation would be harder to overhear. I need to know something, I said without preamble. What's the real mission here? Davis's expression confirmed he knew more than he'd shared. What did you find? Grayson's communicating with someone called Director. They're mapping Lumina's defenses, cataloging technology for acquisition. This isn't a diplomatic mission. He sighed, shoulders dropping slightly. Not for everyone on the team, no. The official parameters are exactly what you were told. Establish diplomatic contact, cultural exchange. But certain team members have secondary objectives. Military intelligence gathering, and more. Mapping the tunnel network, identifying structural weaknesses, cataloging technology with military applications. Davis lowered his voice further. Some of us were briefed differently before deployment. Why tell me now? Because you're smart enough to figure it out anyway, and because I'm not sure I agree with the approach. He glanced around the empty space. Look, these people aren't a threat. They could have wiped us out centuries ago if they wanted to. That evening, I paid closer attention to my teammates' movements around our quarters, and during our tour of a Luminan educational center, 3 security team members I'd previously assessed as particularly loyal to Grayson separated briefly from the group at strategic intervals. Each time they returned, they'd adjusted something on their equipment belts. After dinner, while everyone retired to their quarters, I retraced our path through the education center. In a recessed corner near an environmental control panel, I found it. A small device, no larger than my thumbnail, attached to the wall. The design was sophisticated but recognizable to anyone with military intelligence training. A surveillance transmitter designed to capture both audio and specific energy signatures. Similar devices were likely spread throughout every facility we'd visited. We weren't just gathering information during our tours. We were bugging Lumina, preparing for something beyond diplomatic relations. As I returned to the diplomatic quarter, I passed a large assembly chamber where council meetings were held. Through the partially open doors, I glimpsed Grayson in conversation with several Luminans, including one female figure whose bearing commanded attention even from a distance. Unlike Theron's careful diplomacy, her gestures were more direct, her stance authoritative. I slipped past without being noticed, but the image stayed with me. Grayson engaging with Luminan leadership while simultaneously orchestrating covert surveillance of their civilization. That night, lying in my quarters under kilometers of Antarctic ice, I faced an uncomfortable realization. I had been selected for this mission because of my cave warfare experience, analytical abilities, and psychological stability. But no one had questioned which side I would choose if forced to make a moral decision between mission objectives and preventing harm. I stared at the softly glowing ceiling, weighing loyalty against ethics. The Luminans had shared knowledge freely, offering insights into technology that could transform life on the surface. In return, we were planting bugs and assessing their vulnerabilities. As the artificial sun began its programmed dawn cycle, I made my decision. Whatever happened next, I needed to understand the full scope of Grayson's plan before I could determine my response. The fate of two civilizations might depend on what unfolded in the coming days. By the start of our third week in Lumina, the air had changed. The Luminans' perfect hospitality continued on the surface, but their demeanor had changed subtly. Guards appeared at intersections where none had stood before. Access to certain areas became restricted without explanation. Theron's diplomatic pleasantries seemed more rehearsed, his eyes looking at us with increased alertness. I noticed these changes during our morning tour of a communications facility. While the others marveled at holographic data transmission, I counted the new security personnel, at least double from the previous week. Something had changed, and I suspected it involved the surveillance devices Grayson's team had planted throughout the city. That afternoon, a young Luminan aide approached me as our group returned to the diplomatic quarter. "James Harrison, Council Leader Maris requests your presence," she said quietly. "Alone." Davis caught my eye from across the room, his expression questioning. I gave him a subtle nod. I'd fill him in later. "When?" I asked. "Now, if you're available. I'll escort you." I followed her through corridors I hadn't seen before, deeper into the administrative section of Lumina. The architecture grew more formal here, high ceilings with intricate patterns of light embedded in the walls. We passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each staffed by Luminans with a military look compared to their civilian counterparts. The aide stopped before a set of doors made from a material that resembled polished obsidian. "Council Leader Maris awaits you inside," she said, then departed. The doors slid open silently. I stepped into a circular chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed what looked like real-time star patterns, impossible given our location beneath the Antarctic ice. In the center stood a woman I recognized from glimpses during Grayson's meetings. Taller than most Luminans, Council Leader Maris turned to face me. Her age was difficult to determine. She could have passed for 50 in surface terms, though I knew Luminans lived significantly longer lives. "James Harrison," she said, her voice deeper and more resonant than Theron's. "Thank you for coming. Please, join me." She gestured to a seating area with 2 chairs positioned beside a small fountain that bubbled with luminescent blue water. "I've been hoping for an opportunity to speak with you directly," she continued once I was seated. "You've shown particular insight during your time with us." I kept my expression neutral. "I appreciate the invitation, Council Leader. Maris, please." She studied me for a moment, her larger-than-human eyes unblinking. I'll be direct, James. Our monitoring systems have detected surveillance devices placed throughout Lumina during your team's visits. Sophisticated technology, though primitive by our standards. My stomach dropped. They knew. You don't seem surprised, she observed. I weighed my options carefully. Loyalty to my team versus the ethics of what we were doing. The surveillance wasn't officially part of my mission parameters, but I'd said nothing when I discovered it. I became aware of the devices recently, I admitted. Not all team members were informed of this aspect of the mission. Yet you said nothing? I was still determining the best course of action. Maris nodded, seemingly satisfied with my honesty. Rather than confront your team directly, I wanted to understand the surface government's true intentions. Perhaps you can illuminate this for me. I had to decide. My next words would affect relations between our civilizations, and likely my own fate. Based on communications I've intercepted, Colonel Grayson appears to have military objectives beyond our stated diplomatic mission, I said, choosing each word carefully. Technology assessment, defense capabilities, access points to your tunnel system. His orders seem focused on acquisition rather than exchange. Maris sighed, a surprisingly human gesture. I'm not surprised, though I am disappointed. We had hoped this official contact might be different. She rose and walked to a control panel embedded in the wall. With a gesture, she activated a display showing a timeline of dates and locations. 1947, Nordostlandet. 1968, East Antarctica. 1984, Ellesmere Island. 2003, South Georgia. She pointed to each in turn. Previous surface expeditions that attempted similar intelligence gathering. Some military, some scientific in appearance, all with the same objective: to assess and potentially acquire our technology. I stared at the display, processing the implications. This wasn't the first contact scenario Grayson had presented to us. Surface governments had known about the Luminans for decades. The Council debated extensively before allowing your team access to Lumina, Maris continued. Many argued against it, citing these previous violations. But some of us believed that formal diplomatic recognition might lead to more productive engagement. Her expression hardened slightly. I'm beginning to think the skeptics were correct. Not everyone on our team shares Grayson's agenda, I told her. Some of us genuinely want peaceful exchange. I know. That's why you're here and not in detention. Maris returned to her seat. Your ethical conflict has been evident in your neural patterns since you discovered the surveillance. You can monitor our thoughts? I asked, unable to hide my alarm. Not specific thoughts. Our technology can detect patterns of neural activity associated with conflict, deception, or distress. It's how we've survived millennia of isolation, by accurately assessing threats. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me honestly, James, what would you do in my position? The question caught me off guard. If I learned visitors to my home were secretly planting surveillance, I'd remove them immediately. Yet we haven't. Maris's expression became unreadable. We're still evaluating which of you can be trusted. This conversation is part of that assessment. Before I could respond, her communication device chimed softly. She checked it, then looked back to me. It seems Colonel Grayson has just been informed that your team has been granted access to our central technology hub tomorrow. A gesture of goodwill from the Council. Her slight smile suggested this was no coincidence. I'm curious to see what choices you make with this information, James Harrison. She stood, signaling our meeting was over. The aide will escort you back to your quarters. Thank you for your candor. As I left, I felt troubled by what had just happened. The Luminans knew about our covert activities, but were playing a deeper game. They wanted to see who would betray them and who could be trusted. I returned to the diplomatic quarter to find the team gathered in the common area. Excitement buzzed through the room as Grayson addressed them. Tomorrow represents a significant breakthrough, he announced. The Luminans have granted us access to their central technology hub. the heart of their power and communication systems. Dr. Sharma looked genuinely thrilled. This is extraordinary. Their energy conversion systems alone could revolutionize our understanding of physics. Grayson nodded, his expression professionally pleased, though I now recognized the calculated ambition beneath. We'll depart at 800 hours. Everyone should prepare documentation equipment and be well rested. As the meeting broke up, I noticed Grayson motion to 3 security team members to stay behind. I pretended to leave but lingered just outside the doorway, positioning myself where I could overhear their conversation. "Tomorrow initiates Phase 2, Grayson said. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "While the scientists are occupied with the main exhibits, your team will secure access to the targeting systems and propulsion technology. Davis will create a distraction if needed." I felt shocked at the mention of Davis. Was he part of this too? "Sir, what about extraction?" one of the security team asked. "Transport is prepared. Once we have the core technology samples, we move quickly. The diplomatic team will remain as cover while we transfer the priority materials." I withdrew before they noticed me, my mind racing. This wasn't just surveillance. They were planning to steal Luminan technology and leave some of us behind. I found Davis alone in his quarters, reviewing notes from our previous tours. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. He looked up, expression guarded. "What's wrong?" "Grayson just mentioned you as part of Phase 2 tomorrow, something about creating a distraction while they secure technology samples." Davis's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "He told you about that?" "I overheard him. Are you part of this, Davis?" He set down his tablet and rubbed his face tiredly. "Not the way you think. Grayson approached me yesterday, said he needed someone he could trust for a special security operation. I figured it was better to know what he was planning than be blindsided. And you didn't think to tell me?" "I was going to. Tonight." He leaned forward. "Look, I don't like this any more than you do. These people haven't shown any hostility. This feels wrong." I believed him, but needed to be sure. "What exactly did Grayson tell you about tomorrow?" "Just that I should create a commotion in the eastern section of the facility at a specific time. He didn't explain why, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out it's a diversion." I made a decision. I need to speak with Grayson, alone. "Be careful," Davis warned. "He's been different since we arrived. More secretive, more driven." I found Grayson in his quarters, reviewing schematics of what appeared to be the technology hub on his tablet. He looked up when I entered, quickly deactivating the display. "Harrison, what can I do for you?" "I'd like to understand what's really happening tomorrow, sir." His eyes narrowed slightly. "It's a scientific exchange, as announced. With all due respect, Colonel, I know about Phase 2. We were silent for a moment. Grayson's expression hardened, then relaxed into something almost like relief. "Close the door, Harrison." I did, then stood at parade rest, waiting. "You've always been perceptive. It's why you were selected." Grayson set his tablet aside. "What exactly do you think you know?" "You're planning to acquire Luminan technology samples during the tour tomorrow. Davis is meant to create a distraction while a security team secures the targets." Grayson studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "That's part of it. Sit down, Harrison. You've earned the truth." I took the chair across from him, keeping my face neutral despite how upset I felt. "The surface governments are afraid," Grayson said bluntly. "And they should be. We've known about the Luminans for decades. Isolated encounters, recovered technology, intercepted signals. What we've learned is that they possess technological capabilities centuries beyond our own. They've shown no hostility," I pointed out. "Yet." Grayson leaned forward. "They monitor all our communications. They've interfered in our affairs. Alara practically admitted they manipulated the Cuban Missile Crisis. They have tunnel networks beneath every continent on Earth, and they've chosen to remain hidden, watching us. What happens when they decide surface humans are too dangerous to leave alone?" I remained silent, letting him continue. Our mission was never just diplomatic contact. It's preemptive security. His voice took on an intensity I hadn't heard before. We need to understand their capabilities and acquire technological leverage. Not for aggression, for survival. By stealing their technology? By securing technological parity. Grayson's expression hardened. Make no mistake, Harrison. The Luminans are not sharing their most advanced systems with us. What they've shown is carefully curated, impressive but limited. Their true defensive and offensive capabilities remain hidden. I thought about what Maris had revealed. The previous expeditions, their monitoring of our neural patterns, their technology so advanced it bordered on magical to us. And tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow we secure key examples of their propulsion and energy systems, enough to reverse engineer the principles. Grayson leaned back, studying me. You're one of our best, Harrison. I want you to lead the acquisition team. There's significant financial compensation waiting when we return to the surface with these samples. Your future would be secure. I needed to appear to consider his offer, to keep his trust long enough to decide my next move. How would we get the technology out? The Luminans monitor everything. Grayson smiled slightly. Their monitoring isn't as perfect as they'd like us to believe. We've developed countermeasures based on previous encounters. The extraction team will create a diplomatic incident as cover for the technology transfer. And the rest of the team, Dr. Sharma and the others, they'll remain as planned to complete the diplomatic mission. Their ignorance is genuine and useful. I nodded slowly, as if processing the plan. I'll need to review the specifics before tomorrow. Of course. Grayson seemed satisfied with my response. Report back at 600 for final briefing. This operation will transform Earth's security posture, Harrison. You're part of something historic. I left Grayson's quarters with my decision already made. Whatever the Luminans' true nature and intentions, theft and deception weren't the answer. The potential consequences for both civilizations were too grave. I needed to find Theron. The Luminan communication device we'd been given for emergencies sat on my bedside table. I activated it, requesting an urgent meeting with Counselor Theron. The response came almost immediately. He would meet me in the small meditation garden adjacent to our quarters in 10 minutes. The garden was a peaceful space with living plants growing in spiral patterns around a central pool. Theron was already waiting when I arrived, his tall shape silhouetted against the bioluminescent flora. James Harrison, he greeted me. This is unexpected. I need to speak with you about tomorrow's visit to the technology hub. Theron's expression remained diplomatic, but I sensed increased alertness. What concerns you? Grayson is planning to steal samples of your propulsion and energy technology during the tour. He has a team prepared to create a distraction and secure the samples. I believe they have developed some means to counteract your surveillance. To his credit, Theron didn't appear shocked. You're betraying your commanding officer and your mission. Why? Because it's wrong, I said simply. And because the consequences could be disastrous for both our peoples. Theron studied me for a long moment, his larger-than-human eyes unblinking. Council Leader Maris suggested you might make this choice. You knew this was coming? We suspected. Colonel Grayson's neural patterns have shown increasing determination and secretiveness. Theron touched a control on his wrist device. Security protocols are now active. Thank you for your warning, James Harrison. Almost immediately, I noticed a change in the environment. The lighting throughout the diplomatic quarter shifted to a subtle red hue. The doors leading to the main corridor sealed themselves with a soft hiss. What will happen to the others? I asked. Those involved in the planned theft will be detained using non-lethal methods. Those truly innocent will be treated with respect. Theron's voice remained calm, but had lost its diplomatic warmth. Please remain here. Through the garden's open archway, I watched as Luminan security forces entered the diplomatic quarter. Tall figures carrying slender devices that resembled wands rather than conventional weapons. They moved with practiced efficiency, heading directly toward Grayson's quarters in the rooms of the security team members I'd seen him briefing. I heard a brief commotion, a strange buzzing sound, then silence. Minutes later, Davis appeared at the garden entrance, escorted by a Luminen guard. "James, what's happening?" he asked, confusion clear on his face. "Security measure," I replied, not wanting to reveal my role yet. Two more team members joined us, Dr. Sharma and a junior scientist named Rivera. Both looked concerned but not frightened. Theron returned with Council Leader Maris and several other Luminans I didn't recognize. Their expressions were solemn. "Where are the others?" I asked. "Detained," Maris answered. "Safely and humanely, I assure you." She gestured for us to be seated on the curved benches surrounding the central pool. "We expected this betrayal," she said without preamble, "though we hoped for better." Previous surface expeditions followed similar patterns, diplomatic overtures followed by attempted technology appropriation. Dr. Sharma looked stunned. I knew nothing about this. Our mission was scientific and diplomatic exchange. "We know," Maris assured her. Neural monitoring confirmed which team members were genuinely unaware of the covert objective. Davis looked at me, realization dawning. "You warned them." I nodded. "Grayson revealed the true mission parameters to me tonight, offered me leadership of the acquisition team." "And you refused," Theron stated. "I made the ethical choice," I replied. "Stealing your technology wouldn't lead to security for either of our civilizations. It would start an escalation with unpredictable consequences." Maris stepped forward, her presence commanding respect even in crisis. "The Council allowed this contact to identify which surface representatives could be trusted," she explained. "We've monitored your reactions, your choices, your neural responses to our civilization. Some of you have proven yourselves worthy of trust." She looked directly at me, then at Davis, Dr. Sharma, and Rivera. "You four will be separated from the others while we determine the appropriate response to this violation. Lumina is now in security lockdown. All access points to the surface are sealed." "What about Grayson and the others?" Rivera asked nervously. "They will be detained until the Council decides their fate," Theron answered. "No harm will come to them, but they have violated the most basic principles of diplomatic exchange." Davis moved closer to me, speaking quietly. "Did you make the right call? They've locked down everything." I watched as Luminen security personnel moved efficiently through the diplomatic quarter, securing areas and establishing new protocols. "Yes," I answered with conviction. "Grayson's plan would have triggered something much worse than a lockdown. This is a civilization with technology centuries beyond ours and tunnel access beneath every continent. Consider the alternatives if they felt genuinely threatened." As we were escorted to separate secure quarters, I caught a glimpse of Grayson being led down a corridor under guard. His eyes met mine, recognition and fury dawning as he realized my role in the operation's failure. I turned away, following my Luminen escort into an uncertain future. I had chosen to betray my mission but honor my principles. Whether that choice would lead to reconciliation between our civilizations or deepen the division remained to be seen. Behind us, Lumina's systems continued the lockdown procedure, ancient security protocols activating throughout the vast underground network that had remained hidden from the surface world for 15 millennia. 3 days passed after the lockdown of Lumina. The Luminen security forces kept us separated from Grayson and his conspirators, treating us with a cautious respect that suggested our status remained undetermined. My quarters became a comfortable cell. All amenities provided but no freedom to leave. On the morning of the 4th day, a Luminen aide arrived to escort me to the council chamber. The same place where I'd spoken privately with Maris, but this time the full council would be present. "The others from your team who were uninvolved will join us shortly," she explained as we walked. "What about Grayson and his security team?" I asked. "They are being dealt with separately." The council chamber looked transformed. What had been an intimate meeting space now featured a circular arrangement of elevated seats for the council members. In the center stood a table with 4 chairs, presumably for me, Davis, Dr. Sharma, and Rivera. Davis arrived first, his face showing relief when he saw me. "They've barely told us anything," he said quietly as he took the seat beside mine. "Same here. I'm guessing we're about to learn our fate." Dr. Sharma and Rivera entered together, looking tense but composed. Dr. Sharma gave me a questioning look as she sat down. "We'll find out soon," I said in response to her unasked question. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened, and 7 Luminans entered. I recognized Maris and Theron, but the other 5 were unfamiliar. All wore ceremonial silver robes. The council members took their elevated seats, forming a semicircle above us. The chamber fell silent. Maris spoke first. "This emergency session of the Luminan High Council will now commence. Before us are 4 surface representatives who have demonstrated ethical judgment during recent events." She looked directly at us. "We face an unprecedented situation. For 15 millennia, Lumina has remained separate from the surface world, observing but not engaging. That policy has preserved our civilization through countless surface conflicts." Another council member leaned forward. "Yet modern surface technology makes our continued concealment increasingly difficult. Deep Earth scanning, expanded mining operations, military bunker systems, all threaten accidental discovery." "Which brings us to our dilemma," Theron added. "The attempted theft of our technology was not unexpected. It follows a pattern we have observed in previous limited contacts with surface military organizations." "Then why allow us here at all?" Dr. Sharma asked. Maris nodded. "Because isolation is no longer sustainable. We need reliable surface allies before hostile nations discover us and respond with fear rather than diplomacy." I immediately understood what this meant. The Luminans hadn't just been testing us. They were actively searching for trustworthy surface contacts. "You've been planning for controlled disclosure," I said. "For decades," Theron confirmed. "But finding surface representatives who value ethics over national or military interests has proven challenging." I glanced at my teammates. They seemed to understand too. The chamber fell silent as the council members exchanged looks. Then Maris continued. "What do you propose, James Harrison? You betrayed your mission parameters to prevent theft of our technology. What would you recommend now?" All eyes turned to me. I took a moment to organize my thoughts. "A compromise," I said finally. "Allow those of us who have proven trustworthy to return to the surface as official liaisons. We can help develop protocols for controlled information release while protecting Lumina's most sensitive locations and technologies." Davis nodded beside me. "We could establish secure communication channels, identify other surface individuals who can be trusted. The scientific exchange could begin with non-military applications," Dr. Sharma added. "Medical technology, environmental systems, benefits that demonstrate peaceful intentions." The council members conferred quietly among themselves. I noticed Maris watching me carefully. "There are factions among us who still advocate complete isolation," she said after a moment. "They fear any surface contact will eventually lead to conflict." "They may be right," I acknowledged. "But isolation is no longer an option. Better to control the disclosure process than wait for accidental discovery." The council withdrew for private deliberation, leaving us alone in the chamber. The 4 of us spoke in hushed tones, aware that even here we were likely monitored. "Did you know about any of this?" Rivera asked me. I shook my head. I suspected something wasn't right with our mission, but I didn't know the full history. "If surface governments have known about Lumina since 1947, Grayson couldn't have been operating completely alone," Davis said, keeping his voice low. "That's what worries me," I replied. "Whoever authorized his operation is still out there." An hour passed before the council returned. Their expressions revealed nothing as they took their seats. Maris addressed us directly. "After consideration, the council has reached a decision. We accept the proposal for limited surface liaison, with conditions, Theron elaborated. First, you will undergo a procedure that creates neural blocks preventing unauthorized information sharing. You will be able to discuss Lumina only with cleared individuals. Second, continued another council member, Luminan representatives will establish a presence in key surface governments to monitor compliance and progress. And what about Grayson and his team? I asked. Maris's expression hardened slightly. They have received memory modifications. They will recall a failed expedition due to environmental hazards, with no memory of actual contact with Lumina. They will be returned to the surface separately. The implications of such advanced neural manipulation sent a chill through me. If the Luminans could selectively erase or block memories, what other capabilities did they possess that they hadn't shown us? Do we have a choice about these neural blocks? Davis asked. You may decline, Theron replied evenly. But then you would remain in Lumina permanently. Not much of a choice. I looked at my teammates. They seemed to be thinking the same thing. I accept the conditions, I said. One by one, the others agreed. The procedure is non-invasive and painless, Maris assured us. You will retain all your memories and normal function. The block activates only if you attempt to share restricted information with unauthorized individuals. The next day was full of preparations. The neural procedure was indeed painless, sitting in a chamber bathed in pulsing light while wearing a headset of unfamiliar design. I felt nothing during the process, but afterward experienced a strange certainty about what I could and couldn't discuss regarding Lumina. 2 Luminans were selected to accompany us back to the surface, a male named Valen and a female named Alara. They underwent extensive modifications to their appearance, making them passably human to casual observation. Their height was reduced, their eyes made smaller, their luminescence suppressed through medical means. We departed through a different tunnel system than the one we'd arrived through. This network led to a concealed exit in northern Canada rather than Antarctica. The Luminan transit system moved us thousands of kilometers in hours, a journey that would have taken days by conventional transportation. We emerged into the bright daylight of the Arctic summer, where a military transport helicopter waited. No explanations were given for how this had been arranged. Just another piece of evidence that surface Luminan contacts were more established than we'd been told. 3 days later, I found myself in a nondescript government facility in Nevada. The room looked like a standard meeting space: conference table, chairs, water pitchers, blank walls. Only the lack of windows and the subtle security measures at the door hinted at its true nature. Davis sat beside me. Valen and Alara, now dressed in conservative business attire that helped mask their Luminan features, sat across from us. We'd been waiting for 20 minutes when the door finally opened. A man in his late 50s entered, wearing an unremarkable gray suit. His only distinctive features were unusually penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. He carried a thin digital tablet, but no other materials. "I'm Director Calloway," he said without preamble as he took a seat at the head of the table. "I oversee special diplomatic operations for a multinational security council." He set down his tablet and looked directly at me. "James Harrison, your actions in Lumina have created quite the situation." "Sir, Grayson was attempting unauthorized technology acquisition," I began. He raised a hand to stop me. "I'm aware. More aware than you might think." He turned to the Luminans. "Valen and Alara, I believe. Welcome to the surface in an official capacity." The casual acknowledgement stunned me. "You knew about them all along?" 5 governments have known about Lumina since 1947, Calloway replied matter-of-factly. United States, Russia, United Kingdom, China, and a European consortium. We've maintained joint secrecy through a specialized diplomatic channel. He tapped his tablet, and a timeline appeared on the wall screen behind him. Decades of covert operations, surveillance, and limited contacts with Luminan outposts. The 1947 incident involved a Luminan transit vehicle that malfunctioned near Roswell, New Mexico, he continued. Rather than admit we'd discovered an underground civilization, The governments involved created elaborate cover stories. "If you already had diplomatic channels, why send our team?" Davis asked. Calloway's expression hardened. Colonel Grayson's operation was unsanctioned, a rogue initiative by certain military-industrial interests seeking to acquire Luminen technology independently. "You're saying you didn't authorize it?" I pressed. "The official mission parameters were diplomatic contact only." Calloway looked at me intently. "We suspected Grayson had additional objectives, but allowed the mission to proceed as a test, both of his faction's intentions and Luminen security responses." I suddenly understood. We were bait, expendable assets in a larger game. I prefer to think of it as an opportunity that served multiple interests. Calloway opened a folder on his tablet. "Now we face the consequences. The Luminen Council has made their position clear. Either we establish formalized diplomatic relations with proper safeguards, or they will take more drastic measures to ensure their security." "What happens to us?" Davis asked. "You'll both be debriefed extensively, then reassigned according to your skills and the needs of this new diplomatic reality." Calloway looked directly at me. "With one exception. You, Harrison." "What about me?" "Your intervention requires both punishment and proof of our good faith to the Luminans." His tone remained conversational despite the content. "You'll undergo official containment. 5 years in a secure facility in northern Canada." "Prison," I said flatly. "A comfortable research station with restricted communication and travel. You'll have access to books, entertainment, limited internet. Think of it as a well-appointed exile rather than incarceration." I glanced at Valen and Alara, who remained very calm. "Is this part of your agreement with the Council?" "It was their suggestion," Alara confirmed. "Both as protection for you from those who might disapprove of your choices, and as demonstration that surface authorities take these matters seriously." Calloway continued, "Meanwhile, we'll establish a Luminen embassy disguised as a research facility in Switzerland. Phase 1 of integration will focus on medical technology exchanges and environmental monitoring systems." "And Grayson?" I asked. "Colonel Grayson and his collaborators have been reassigned to remote posts with close supervision. Their memory modifications appear completely successful. They believe the Antarctica mission encountered structural ice collapse that forced evacuation." The meeting continued for hours as Calloway outlined the complex process that would follow. Careful steps toward integration while maintaining public ignorance. The Luminans would establish small, disguised presences in major nations. Limited technology exchange would begin in non-military sectors. A 20-year timeline for potential public disclosure would be developed. 2 days later, I was transported to my containment facility, a former weather research station repurposed for my unique situation. Located in the remote forests of northern Canada, the facility offered comfortable living quarters, research equipment, and several acres of wooded grounds surrounded by a perimeter fence. My communication with the outside world would be limited to approved channels and visitors. As I settled into what would be my home for the next 5 years, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. I'd sacrificed my freedom to prevent a technology theft that might have triggered conflict between 2 branches of humanity. Now I was both prisoner and pioneer, one of the few surface humans fully aware of what lay beneath our feet. Davis visited 3 months into my containment, bringing news of the outside world. He'd been appointed as a liaison between surface military organizations and the Luminen Security Council, working to establish trust between centuries-old adversaries. "They've started releasing some of their medical technology," he told me as we walked through the snow-covered grounds of my comfortable prison. "Cancer treatment protocols that are decades beyond anything we have. The public thinks it's a breakthrough from conventional research." "And the military factions that wanted their defense technology?" I asked. Davis's expression darkened. "Still active, still pushing, but they're being contained for now. Calloway and his counterparts in other governments understand the stakes." As he prepared to leave, Davis handed me a small package. "From Council Leader Maris, approved by security." Inside, I found a crystal storage device and a handwritten note. For when you're ready to tell the story that both worlds need to hear. I looked up at Davis, questioning. 5 years gives you time to write, James, he said with a slight smile. Who better to explain the future of human relations than the man who stood between two civilizations and chose peace? As his helicopter lifted off, I stood watching the snow swirl around the clearing. Beneath my feet lay tunnels connecting to an ancient civilization that had developed in parallel to surface humanity for 15 millennia. Above was a world that had no idea about the changes coming that would transform human history. After 5 years, my comfortable exile at the Canadian Research Station had given me plenty of time to think, read, and carefully document everything I'd experienced beneath the Antarctic ice. The neural blocks implanted by the luminans remained active. I physically couldn't share restricted information with unauthorized individuals, even if I wanted to. On a rainy Tuesday in April 2018, Director Calloway arrived personally to inform me my containment period had ended. "You've served your time with remarkable patience, Harrison," he said as we walked the perimeter fence one last time. "The Council is satisfied with your compliance." "What happens now?" I asked. "Relocation to Scotland, a small town called Aberfeldy in Perthshire. You'll have a cottage, a modest stipend, and limited supervision. Not freedom exactly, but not containment either." I nodded, unsurprised. I had known from the beginning that my life would never fully return to normal. 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of a stone cottage overlooking the rolling hills of the Scottish Highlands. The place was small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen, and a living area with a fireplace. Large windows faced east, capturing the morning light. My new home came with modern amenities disguised within rustic surroundings, high-speed, secure internet lines, specialized communication equipment concealed in ordinary-looking furniture, and subtle security measures I recognized from my military training. A woman from the village delivered groceries weekly. My neighbors believed I was a retired government researcher writing a book, not entirely untrue. For all practical purposes, I was free to move about within a 50-mile radius, but travel beyond required authorization. 2 unobtrusive security personnel lived in the village, monitoring without interfering. I established a simple routine: morning walks through the hills, afternoons of writing, evenings reading by the fire. The isolation suited me after 5 years of containment. The neural blocks meant I couldn't discuss Lumina with locals, but I found I didn't mind the enforced silence on that subject. 3 months after my relocation, Davis visited for the first time. He arrived unannounced on a misty fall morning, driving a nondescript rental car up the narrow lane to my cottage. "Nice place," he said, scanning the surroundings. "Secure?" "Enough," I replied, leading him inside. "Tea?" "Something stronger if you have it." I poured 2 glasses of scotch, and we settled in the living room. Davis had changed in the 5 years since I'd seen him last. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. "How's your new role treating you?" I asked. "Complicated." Davis took a sip of his drink, gathering his thoughts. "I'm officially listed as a special diplomatic liaison attached to NATO. Cover for my real work." "And what is your real work?" "Connecting our worlds and stopping those who want to ruin it." He set his glass on the table and leaned forward. "The integration program has made progress, limited but real." "Tell me." "Medical technology exchanges have begun, just like they planned. 3 new cancer treatments introduced through conventional research channels. Environmental monitoring systems deployed in key locations to help with climate tracking." I nodded. "The public has no idea where they really came from." "Of course not. Public disclosure remains at least a decade away according to the timeline." Davis hesitated. "But that's not why I'm here." I'd known from the moment I saw his face that this wasn't just a social call. "What's wrong?" "Operation Subterranean Shield." He spoke the name quietly. Classified joint military initiative between elements of the US, Russian, and Chinese defense establishments. Black budget, off the official channels. My stomach tightened. The same factions that sent Grayson. More organized now, more resources. Davis pulled a small device from his pocket and placed it on the table. A privacy field generator, military grade. This will block any surveillance for about 20 minutes. Once activated, he continued, they're developing technology specifically designed to counter Luminan advantages. Tunnel detection systems, experimental weapons designed to penetrate their shielding, plans to establish military outposts near key access points. Calloway knows about this? He's fighting it through diplomatic channels, but he's losing ground. The hardliners make a compelling argument. We need leverage in case the Luminans decide to become hostile. They've had 15,000 years to become hostile, I pointed out. They've shown remarkable restraint given how we've behaved. You don't need to convince me. Davis checked his watch. I can't stay long, but you needed to know what's happening. Your Luminan friends should know too. After Davis left, I sat by the fire for hours, weighing my options. The neural blocks prevented unauthorized communication about Lumina, but I'd been given a secure channel when I left containment, for emergencies only, Calloway had said. This qualified. The communication device resembled an ordinary e-reader, but contained quantum-encrypted technology developed by Luminan engineers. I activated it and composed a message using the protocols I'd memorized years ago. 3 days later, I received a response. Coordinates in Iceland, a date 2 weeks away, and the simple message, she will meet you there. Arranging travel required Calloway's approval. I contacted him through my secured line, explaining only that I'd received a request for meeting through authorized channels. Iceland? His voice carried suspicion. What's in Iceland? I don't know until I get there, I replied truthfully, but it came through the official channel. A long pause followed. Approved. My office will arrange transportation. Keep your tracking device active at all times. The journey to Iceland took me through Edinburgh and Reykjavik, each transfer point monitored by discreet security personnel who never directly acknowledged my presence but always remained visible enough for me to know they were there. From Reykjavik, a helicopter carried me to a remote field station near the Vatnajökull Glacier. The station appeared to be a climate research facility, a cluster of modern buildings nestled against the stark Icelandic landscape. As the helicopter departed, I recognized a figure emerging from the main building. James Harrison, Theron greeted me, looking remarkably human in cold-weather gear that hid most of his distinctive features. Welcome to Outpost 7. He led me inside to a conference room where Council Leader Maris waited. 5 years had changed her little, a benefit of Luminan longevity. She wore surface clothing, her distinctive eyes hidden behind specialized contact lenses. Thank you for coming, she said without preamble. Your message was concerning. I explained everything Davis had told me about Operation Subterranean Shield. Maris and Theron exchanged glances as I spoke. This confirms our own intelligence, Maris said when I finished. We have detected increased scanning activities near several transit nodes, surface military units conducting exercises in locations suspiciously close to our access points. It's not the official policy, I emphasized. The diplomatic program continues. This is a parallel initiative by hardliners who don't trust the peaceful approach. We face similar challenges below, Theron admitted. A faction called the Preservation Council argues for complete severance of surface contacts. They believe any interaction threatens our security. The same pattern repeats in both societies, Maris said, rising to approach a digital display showing the global network of Luminan settlements and transit connections. Fear of the other driving preparations for conflict rather than cooperation. What can I do? I asked. Maris turned to face me directly. We need someone who understands both worlds and has proven their commitment to peace. Someone who can help shape surface perception before hardliners force events toward confrontation. You want me as some kind of ambassador? We want you to tell our story, she said. not through classified channels or diplomatic protocols, but to the broader public. I looked confused. The neural blocks prevent me from discussing Lumina with unauthorized individuals. They prevent you from sharing specific classified information, Theron clarified, but not from writing what appears to be fiction. Understanding dawned. You want me to publish an account of my experiences as a novel? Maris nodded. With key details altered to protect vital security information while preserving the essential truth. The neural blocks will naturally prevent you from including restricted data. A novel that appears to be speculation, but contains enough truth to prepare the public mind for eventual disclosure, Theron added. Would surface authorities allow this? I asked. Director Calloway and his counterparts in other nations have already approved the concept, Maris replied. They see the value in gradual psychological preparation of the public. Fiction provides plausible deniability while seeding important concepts. I considered the proposal. It would serve another purpose too: insurance. Explain, Theron requested. If enough people read an account that's dismissed as fiction, but later proven partially true, it becomes harder for either side to take extreme measures without public scrutiny. Maris nodded, a slight smile forming. Precisely our thinking. The manuscript would serve as both preparation and protection. We spent the next 2 days at the outpost, carefully outlining what could and couldn't be included in my account. Certain technologies, the exact locations of Luminan settlements, and specific defense capabilities would remain classified. But the broader story, the discovery of an underground civilization, the ethical challenges of first contact, the competing interests of different factions, could be told. Before I departed, Maris handed me a small crystal storage device similar to the one she'd sent during my containment. References and historical context that will help with your writing, she explained. Access is permitted under your neural protocols. Will I see you again? I asked. When the manuscript is complete, she replied. Safe journey, James Harrison. The weeks following my return to Scotland were productive. I wrote daily, sometimes for 12 hours straight. The neural blocks operated subtly. Whenever I attempted to include restricted information, my thoughts would simply slide away from the subject, redirecting to approved alternatives. I created a narrative that followed my actual experiences while altering names, locations, and specific technological details. The protagonist became a former Special Forces soldier named Nathan Hale. Lumina became Avalon. The Luminans became the Avali. Surface military factions became corporate interests seeking technological advantages. Davis visited twice during the writing process, reviewing drafts and offering suggestions. Strange reading about yourself with a different name, he commented during his second visit. Though you made me more handsome, which I appreciate. Artistic license, I replied. Any issues with the content? Nothing triggering the security protocols. Calloway's team reviews each chapter. They're satisfied with the balance you're striking. By winter, the manuscript took its final form, a 120,000-word account structured as a science fiction novel. I titled it, A Shadow Beyond the Ice. On a snow-covered morning in January 2019, I sent the completed manuscript through the secure channel. 3 days later, a response arrived from both Surface and Luminan authorities. Approved for publication. I stood by the window of my cottage, watching snow fall on the Scottish hills, thinking about the strange journey from Antarctic expedition to classified prisoner to author of a novel that was both fiction and hidden truth. Somewhere beneath the Earth's surface, 2 million Luminans continued their ancient civilization, gradually reaching toward reconnection with their surface cousins after 15 millennia of separation. My manuscript would soon make its way into the world as speculative fiction. Most readers would enjoy it as an entertaining story of underground civilizations and ethical dilemmas. A few might wonder about the remarkable level of detail in the technological descriptions or the philosophical questions it raised about human contact with an advanced society. And someday, perhaps 10 years from now, perhaps 20, when the truth finally emerged about our underground counterparts, some would remember a novel they'd read that seemed remarkably prescient. I sat at my desk and wrote what would become the author's note for the published book. This story is presented as fiction because the truth has its time. What exists beneath the ice will eventually be revealed. Until that day, let us imagine what might be, and consider how we would react when we truly meet those who live below.